How's it going, everybody? This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. Next 90 minutes on Twitter, YouTube, wherever you are, however you might be tuning in. Nick DeLuca, Chris Persianen, our producer, Alex Wolz. NFL free agency rolls on with the Giants and Jets making moves. The NBA trade deadline approaches with rumors swirling around Aaron Gordon and Lonzo Ball. And the latest from Major League Baseball's free agency and March Madness in full swing. Chris, a lot to get to, and as I am walking over to the football office to do our show tonight, the rain pouring down on me, the weather not great, and yet to me, it was a little symbolic, at least, of as many raindrops as millions of dollars that have been thrown around by any number of these NFL teams in free agency. It was raining outside, and NFL general managers seem very intent on making it rain through the first couple of weeks of free agency.
Absolutely, Nick. First of all, great to be back great to be on a show with you for the first time. And I agree, especially my Giants. It was easy to see the cash flying down from the skies. Players got paid. I know there are a fair amount of cap workarounds and restructurings to be done. We might see contracts like those of James Bradbury, players like that, see some restructuring to help make all the moves fit. But you're right, a lot of spending, and we'll see specifically for teams that did a lot of spending, again, like my Giants, how exactly the money translates on the field.
I was fascinated by it, and I thought that there were good moves, actually, not to divulge too much, but good moves made on both sides for the Jets and the Giants, Dave Gettleman and Joe Douglas. And they, in spending their money, did it wisely enough. Bringing in Kenny Golladay as a number one receiver for the Giants, I think is going to be a pretty good move for them, provided that he can stay healthy, which, of course, is a big if based upon the way that things have gone for him throughout his career. They add a second corner in Adoree Jackson, who I know a lot of people around the NFL think very highly of as well. A Kyle Rudolph situation that we'll have a chance to get into with an injury, but they're honoring his contract and potentially will be in the fold. And then on the other side for the Jets, they bring in Carl Lawson and they make a couple of moves. Vinny Curry, Tevin Coleman in the fold for them, as well as Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh seem to be bringing in guys that they are comfortable with. So a lot of cash being thrown around and improvements that I think will be tangible for these two teams on the field going into 2021.
For sure. We saw signings, like you said, Tevin Coleman going along with the scheme that the Jets might be looking to instill there. You just have both New York teams. I'm not someone, even though I am a fan of the Big Blue, I'm not someone who roots on the downfall of Gang Green. You see both teams here from not both New York teams, because there is a third New York team, to throw some respect to your Bills, but to see the two New York City teams actually intelligently, in my opinion, and not specifically too patiently, because the Giants and the Jets did do some spending, but to see them take their time in selecting who they wanted to sign. You know, the Giants brought in their free agents for some good old-fashioned visits. I just think these teams are trending in the right direction, both.
I'm with you. And then as the show rolls along, we'll get into the trading deadline in the NBA. Knicks and rumors swirling around about them potentially being interested in Lonzo Ball. I know that was a story that you were closely following, and Aaron Gordon requesting a trade from the Orlando Magic. Kyle Lowry apparently cleared to work his way out of Toronto, and potentially the Lakers involved in that situation. The NBA trade deadline, always a fun time in the association, because very often you are getting so many veterans who are, quite frankly, ring chasing and wanting to put themselves in a really good position to do that. And also teams that are on the fringe with an opportunity to push themselves into that next level with a big time move. And to me, Gordon, Lowry, Lonzo and we'll get to LaMelo's injury as well. I got them both on my sheet here, but those are big time names. It's not just, oh, this role player is going to be somebody who will come in to defend in a certain situation. These are some pretty marquee names that are on the market as of right now.
Yeah, it's not just the buyout market. We're not looking at Marvin Williams as a premier signing. There are indeed some names with some firepower behind them, looking like they might be on the move. It's been a quite peculiar year for the association in terms of dealing with COVID-19, the financial effects, but the new deal with Turner Sports was just signed, and I think we might see teams start acting like they are going to have their cap rising in the coming years, might look to acquire a player like Lonzo Ball, who you can then re-sign as a restricted free agent. You're acquiring the rights to pay that RFA if that's who you trade for. And I think that deal is going to make teams a little more optimistic about, what in terms of rivaling the NFL. It won't be too hard in actual money because we see the contracts that get given out in the NBA, but just the philosophy of spending. I think despite the potential desire to be conservative due to the various reasons the NBA has lost some money recently, I think we'll see that confidence head back up.
I mentioned the raindrops with the NFL, the NBA not shy about throwing around money either. And then as we go along, Major League Baseball spring training will update you their latest from that whole situation. And of course, the madness that is the NCAA tournament. And there was some madness. The number one seed Illinois going down, Oral Roberts winning 2 games to advance to the Sweet 16. So a lot to get to on that front. But let's get into the NFL's free agency as we open the show. For the Giants, 2 major signings. They're the talk of the NFL after what was the opening day plus for the New England Patriots in bringing in Kenny Golladay, and that visit and how long it took, and everyone on Twitter saying announce Kenny Golladay to the Giants. They eventually got around to it with the two sides agreeing to a deal, a 4-year, $72 million contract for the number one receiver that Dave Gettleman and company are hoping will provide Daniel Jones with a big-time target and improve the play from what was a down second year, but also, if all else fails, at least give them what you would think is a more concrete answer about where you move forward and how you should regard the quarterback position.
For sure. I think Gettleman openly said himself he knows that they have faith in Daniel Jones. He also knows that they need to go out and get him guys that can get separation or that can go up and catch passes. Kenny Golladay would quite easily fit into the latter of those two, standing at 6'4". He is an athletic target for Daniel Jones, and I think his skill speaks for itself, and it's as simple as that. It's someone who to play at the X that Daniel Jones can target with confidence, and who can go up and make some pretty fun grabs. I think helping out Daniel Jones, at least on the offensive side of things, for sure, was definitely a focus of the Giants, with their other signings as well. Just guys to help Danny. That's their guy. They seem to have the trust needed in a quarterback that, to continue investing in him, that you'd want to see. And the weapons are now finally falling into place for, as you said, Gettleman and company.
When you look at Kenny Galladay's career resume, you generally, as someone who came into the league the way he did, throw out the rookie year. That's going to be interesting, and certainly not the player that he is right now. But 1,000 yards receiving in 18, 1,000 yards receiving in 19, also selected to the Pro Bowl. And then this year, more so than any other, more a concerning year just because of the injury history. And he plays in only the 5 games, does still accumulate 338 yards and catch a couple of touchdowns. But this was not necessarily the season that I think a lot of Lions fans in that case were looking for, and does breed some concern about paying this guy as much money as they are. I agree with you, though, because this is something that they needed to figure out, and this was the best receiver available to them on the market. And when you look at the receiving core that they had, it just wasn't conducive to being successful. They had guys who were redundant. I thought it was interesting, actually, Chris, that you brought up him playing the X receiver because they didn't have that before. They had
Yep.
Darius Slayton and Golden Tate, who seemed to really, at least from a strength perspective, do the same things well. And it just wasn't going to be a situation where those two were going to be able to coexist. And Evan Ingram, despite some of the upside for him, wasn't really producing the way that you would like. And we'll get to Kyle Rudolph in a second, as it seems to be that his time with the Giants could be limited going forward. But I do like the move, and I think that getting Jones the number one receiver is so important, not only because of helping him, but again, just to get a concrete answer on what that quarterback situation is going to look like, because I don't know that you know. And in his rookie year, I thought Daniel Jones did a lot of good things. There was a lot there. And I know that this won't be a popular opinion among Giants fans because coaching quarterbacks and being a head coach are very much two separate things. But Pat Shurmur deserves some credit for how well that Daniel Jones played in his rookie year. And then when he goes out the door, Jason Garrett comes in as the primary handler of Jones, and the results weren't there. And I get it. Saquon Barkley wasn't available for the majority of that season, and we just went through the deficiencies at wide receiver. The Giants were doing a bit of shuffling on their offensive line as well, with a young left tackle and Andrew Thomas and some of the other pieces around him. I think Will Hernandez is somebody who they might be able to rely on going forward at guard, but there was just some of that uncertainty. And even the guy that they signed, Nate Solder, to be that rock, had not been and opted out, obviously, this year. But there were a lot of question marks. I think the Giants are doing a better job of filling those holes and figuring them out. To me, it's you're out of excuses if you're Daniel Jones. This is a big year for him. And
Huge.
credit to Dave Gettleman, because he's put enough around him to say, all right, kid, you better go get this, or we may have to evaluate or look elsewhere.
I loved your initial point about the Giants receivers because a quick counterpoint that people make is, well, the Giants have some decent talent at receiver. They have Shepard, slot guy, Tate, slot guy, yards after catch guy. They have Slayton learning how to potentially be an X, kind of just a deep threat for right now. Jones needs, as I was saying, either a separator or an athletic target. So Galladay, as you were saying, just answers that question for them of finding the number one target, as well as really helps them answer more questions going into the draft in terms of what they might be looking for. Now I think the possibility of drafting someone like Slater opens up. So before I was all in on Waddle or Pitts. Now with Galladay in town, Pitts' skill set, despite being incredible, we just made that hefty investment in our large athletic target. I think I might prefer a Waddle to Pitts at this point because he's that fast receiver who can separate.
I'm sorry, but Kyle Pitts is not falling to you at 11.
Oh, I think the Eagles might take him at 6.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So you can say you want Kyle Pitts all you want, but I'm sorry, he's not going to be there. And he's a great player. I don't know if you saw his combine results, but they were outstanding. I mean, Kyle Pitts is going to be a serious player in the NFL for a long time as a freak athlete. And it's interesting to hear some of the analysts talk about him on ESPN, because they are saying that if he were actually just a wide receiver, he'd probably be the second best wide receiver prospect in the draft, but he's not because he's a tight end. So
I have him as my number 2 receiving prospect.
It's pretty impressive what he's been able to do, and as someone who is just such a weapon, there's going to be an organization that's going to be very happy that they drafted him, and that's why he won't be around very long. So yeah, I agree with you in terms of Galladay giving them that flexibility, and I always think that's important for some of these organizations too, because then when you go into the draft with a huge need, it puts you in a difficult position because inevitably you're drafting that guy. Now, if you're willing to trade up, perhaps you're in a better situation to do that. And maybe then you can target someone in the reasonable range, and you have to give up something to go get there. But then you walk in and say, we have to do this. Whereas now the Giants could considerably think about taking a wide receiver still. I suppose. I think they could make that situation work, but also don't have to. Now you could take another offensive lineman. You could take, if Pitts were there somehow, you could take Kyle Pitts in that situation, or an edge rusher, I think, would be somebody who would benefit them, or it's a deep linebacker class too. And Blake Martinez did a good job throughout the duration of this season, but outside of him, that's a place that I think the Giants could upgrade as well. So there is a lot to be reckoned with for the Giants, and I think they've put themselves in a good position to give them that flexibility coming up in the draft, because you never want to be going in saying, all right, I need an offensive lineman, or I need a wide receiver. We need to draft this person because otherwise we're going to be in trouble. A place where they probably won't have to invest a ton, defensive back. They just signed Adoree Jackson, released by Tennessee, the 26-year-old, 3 years, $39 million. Logan Ryan doing his best to recruit with, who was it? Julius Peppers was in there as well.
Jabril Peppers.
Peppers.
So Brill and Ryan was on vacation in Miami. He flew back up to come recruit his Adoree was Logan Ryan's, NFL veterans, whether they have a very long career at that point or not, they pick a young player to kind of help raise. They have their rook. And Ryan and Adoree Jackson go back a couple years. They had that type of relationship in Tennessee. So Giants brought out the big guns, and Logan Ryan, I believe it was Ian Rappaport who tweeted out a closer GIF for Ryan there, the great Mariano, to just to honor the recruiting ability.
There was quite the effort, and they were able to get it done. So now Adoree Jackson opposite James Bradbury in a secondary that there were not a ton of questions about, with the Giants defense that was really good. Corner 2 would have been the one question, and they seem to have been able to be in a position to solve that issue. And Adoree Jackson with Bradbury with that secondary sounds to me like it's going to be a situation where the Giants are going to be very good on defense again.
Isaac Yiadom was not cutting it at CB2 for consistency reasons. It was, you could get good drives or good plays out of the defense, but all it took was one blown coverage for Zach Ertz or Dallas Goedert, just to pick the Eagles game in particular, to burn us deep, or CeeDee Lamb, or just one blown coverage from your cornerback too, and your whole, just all the effort you've put into a drive is gone. Adoree, despite the large financial investment, I think is worth it just because of the stability he'll bring at cornerback too for the Giants. In terms of football team building philosophy, I'm always in the you can never have enough secondary talent camp. So between Ryan, McKinney, Peppers, Bradbury, Jackson, I'm forgetting some of Julian Love, different players that the Giants have, Darnay Holmes, the depth is going to be great in my opinion, especially for, and I use the term not loosely, I truly do believe this, for a defensive wizard like Patrick Graham to work with.
Persianen loves Patrick Graham. I know that's consistent with how a number of people feel about the Giants defensive coordinator, guy who just signed an extension and was interested in being the defensive coordinator, sticking around, rejecting a couple of the head coaching interviews that came his way. It'll be year 2 for him and Joe Judge, who of course go back to their time in New England. But Patrick Graham was outstanding, and I'm with you 100% in that regard. And bringing in better players is only going to make that defense better. And I like what they do with cornerback 2 and Adoree Jackson opposite of Bradbury. Sounds like a formidable defense to me. And now the next step for them, in my opinion, is to figure out the pass rush, because that has been a place that up the middle has been stabilized by Leonard Williams as somebody who's done a good job of pushing the pocket. But outside of that, there's not a ton. They lose Dalvin Tomlinson, and then in particular on the edge, what is
to
being
Minnesota.
generated for them. Absolutely. So what is being generated for them? That's where I would look. I know it's not a terribly deep edge rusher draft, but that to me seems like it would make sense as the first round pick for the Giants, just because when you analyze the rest of the way the roster is put together, you've solved enough of a hole with Galladay, Adoree Jackson playing corner two. The linebacking core, while not outstanding, I think Martinez does enough to where you can hold on that being your top draft pick. I'm thinking edge rusher here because that to me seems to be the missing piece with Leonard Williams coming back with a big contract up the middle.
Parsons? You a Parsons guy from Penn State?
I like him, but he's more of a linebacker. I don't know how much he'll give you in the edge rush.
Right. So then you're looking at Rousseau, I suppose, from Miami. There's some different options. I think we were just speaking about the flexibility that the Galladay signing, bringing in that kind of name, gives the Giants. I think another underrated aspect might be the opportunity they now have to trade back, even if just a couple spots. And that could be where they grab an edge prospect who they might not have super high on their board in terms of their grade on him, but to get value there, get some other picks. I think, to go back to team building philosophy, that free agency is where you can go out and plug holes, and the draft is where you make your long-term investments. But the Giants, just over the last couple of years, have accrued enough talent, I think, on both ends, where they're now just at a place where they're looking for talent to plug in those holes. As you said, at edge, we had one at cornerback too. Used our free agency, some money there to fill that one. So just looking for those final pieces for Judge, Graham, and company.
It'll be interesting, and of course, free agency not done. So always something to consider when you look at the headlines and potentially any activity that Dave Gettleman or his computer people may be up to in the next few days as free agency second and third and fourth wave continue on. Of course, Logan Ryan is somebody who Giants fans know made a big impact. He didn't sign for a while, so there's always players to be had even after this initial start to free agency. Let's move, well, it's in the same building, but I guess across to the other locker room with the Jets, who were active again at the start in free agency. Carl Lawson, the edge rusher from Cincinnati, they bring in. Desperate help for their pass rush that was needed. Also a wide receiver and a weapon that the Jets had not had for a while. Corey Davis comes in as a free agent signee from the Tennessee Titans in an interesting opening press conference for Corey Davis, who was answering a question about why he was interested in signing with the Jets, to which he answered it was his understanding that Sam Darnold would be the quarterback under center for the Jets. Now, I don't buy that at all, and for a second, I'm sure he was coached to say that, but I do not imagine for any of what it's worth that Sam Darnold will take another snap in a Jets uniform. I am surprised by that response, but I suppose that it is what it is, because what else do you expect him to say? And it's the NFL, so you have to hold a press conference.
Nick, I have to agree with you. I think that even the mention of, was it necessary? Did they, do we know if they specifically asked him what quarterback? Because I think it's one of the worst kept secrets, as you're saying, that, not particularly which quarterback will be taking his place. I believe it'll be BYU's Wilson. But to see Darnold still in green is just not looking likely. As you said, a coached response would be the natural guess, because if at the fan level it's understood that Darnold is probably not going to be there anymore, it's where there's smoke, there's some fire going. Interesting that he even decided to say that. I think that is some real life trolling. I don't know what else the motive was there, besides maybe to somehow create more of a market. But why would anyone, everyone just laughed it off. So,
Something that I got into with Chris Baccia last time out on NFL Friday, of course, available wherever you get your podcast, WFUVsports.org. But there was an article that was published from, I'm blanking on the name of the reporter, but if you go out there and search on Twitter for Sam Darnold and things of that nature, you'll find it. And it was a coach in the AFC who was saying that Sam Darnold stinks and that the evaluation and sentiments that are among fans and those in the media are significantly of higher opinion of Sam Darnold's ability than what actually exists in the NFL, which I found very interesting because you really hear it from particularly people in the media who will say Sam Darnold is outstanding and it's just been the hand that he was dealt. And if he only had a competent organization, look at all the tools and how great he is and this, that, and every excuse under the sun. I'm sorry, because at some point, and I said this on Friday, win more than 2 games. I know that the situation was horrendous for him. Adam Gase was not a good coach at all. That's putting it mildly. And they didn't draft well. There was nothing really around him. At the same time, was this situation worse than Houston? Houston won 4. Deshaun Watson was able to get him to 4, and he had nothing. So I just don't think that he is ever going to prove himself an elite of the elite quarterback the way he gets talked about, because those guys just win more than 2 games. I just don't see it. So that's the thing that's really interesting to me. I'm not saying that he couldn't be successful with an ultra competitive roster around him. I've said it time and time again. I think Alex Smith is a great comparison for him because somebody who could come in and be a competent quarterback, I think he can be coached up, and his tools are probably a little bit better than Alex Smith's. But to pretend like this is a guy who still is of the potential of somebody you can build your franchise around without a great roster, I just don't buy it.
If we're doing comparisons, can I get your thoughts on an athletic Kirk Cousins for Daniel Jones comparison?
Sure, that's fine. And he'll say he likes that comparison. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's the same. It's the same way. It's just one of those things where I feel like you need to be elite at the position, and those guys have not proven to be. Now, there is also the argument to be made that Daniel Jones has not necessarily dismissed that entirely. That said, he also has better things to work around him in particular now. But I don't understand this whole Sam Darnold talk because he really, as much as adversity as has been thrown upon him, he really hasn't done a very good job in overcoming it. And that's not to be mean necessarily, or to be, this guy can't play at all. But I just don't see it to where this is somebody who, wow, he's going to turn around and go to a good organization and all of a sudden be lighting it up like he's Patrick Mahomes. That seems to be thrown around a lot. I don't. There's no way. That's why the Jets should move on.
I liked a place like Indianapolis with a solid offensive line.
Yeah.
As a destination for him, even somewhere like Pittsburgh for the future, just somewhere that can support him and get him what he needs, which is going to be protection, which is going to be a weapon. Like just as the Jets got in Davis, the Giants got in Galladay, someone. Again, I agree with you. Darnold's been dealt a terrible hand. I just know the importance of leadership from the quarterback position, and I feel like any team that can go just have the type of seasons that the Jets have had, I feel like there's something missing, and it might not just be the team situation. To quickly make an analogy to the same city but different sport, I think it's fair to say, on the basketball side, for example, Obi Toppin has been dealt a strange hand in how he's being used and his role, but it's also fair to expect more from him in what he's done so far. I think you can say the exact same for Sam Darnold.
There was a study a while ago that said, depending on how you really feel about whether a quarterback's a hit or miss, in the first round, it's about 40% of a guy you're drafting is going to work out or not. I'll just throw it out there. You can determine whether you like Baker Mayfield, but Lamar Jackson has won the MVP of the 5 guys who were taken in the first round. and Josh Allen was right there. That's 40%. Baker Mayfield maybe at 10%. He might be half, so we might get it to 50. But that would tell you that sometimes those guys just don't tend to work out. Very rarely are you going to get these 4 stud quarterbacks in the first round, and it's sometimes just a numbers game. But I'm down on Sam Darnold. We'll see if he can prove me wrong. But I think that Indianapolis would have been a great spot for him. Unfortunately, that doesn't get done, and we'll see what the future holds. But the quarterback situations and availability are running out in short order. So teams are scrambling to make moves. We'll see what the Jets do in the draft and coming up here as free agency progresses. 20 minutes from now, we talk Major League Baseball spring training, Mets and the Yankees. And up next, the NBA trade deadline tomorrow. Do the Knicks make a move for Lonzo Ball? And do the Lakers have enough to get Kyle Lowry? More one-on-one right after this.
Smile done. Oh, I froze just in case I froze. Ooh,
Back here on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on this Wednesday, March the 24th, just past 10 o'clock here as we enter our final hour on this show. Get into some NBA. The trade deadline is tomorrow, 3 p.m., and some teams positioning themselves to potentially make some moves and make a run and see what the future will hold for the remainder of this regular season. The Knicks linked to Lonzo Ball potentially. Of course, Aaron Gordon demanding a trade from the Orlando Magic. Kyle Lowry also in a position to seek a trade, and a lot of gymnastics going along for where it seems, at least to me, more players are available than perhaps normal in a normal NBA season. Teams are really in positions to make moves. There are some that have made them already, but really interested to see what would happen with Lonzo and Aaron Gordon as two premier pieces. It seems inevitable that Lowry would go somewhere, but those two in particular, Lonzo and Aaron Gordon, are of interest to, I have to believe, a number of teams around the NBA.
Name I think you're sleeping on, if you are including Aaron Gordon in there, is Larry Nance Jr., who has absolutely been killing it in Cleveland this year, and I can say is getting called about. Whether deals are even getting close to agreed to or not is one thing. One thing I read is that GMs are having their executive and assistant GMs make all the crappy first offers because they're sending out so many different offers at this deadline. Teams are just trying to figure out a bunch of different things that they have the assistants just going crazy, calling each other with different offers, trying to get valuations on various assets. I think the market in general is interesting, as aside from players like Ball, there's not too many guards that can hit threes reliably that I think are available. And as teams gear up for contending runs, I think that's a type of archetype that becomes in high demand. I think the market will be interesting for players like Fournier, for players like Aaron Gordon, both on the Orlando Magic, even guys like JJ Redick, who might see the buyout market. I think the shooters intrigue me this deadline, just in terms of what might get given up, what teams are not willing to give up, and who will actually get traded.
I want to start with the Knicks, too, as we get into these case-by-case scenarios for some of these players. Currently at 22-22, tied for sixth in the Eastern Conference, and we've been through this as a team that under Tom Thibodeau has really overperformed, and it was not something that I think a number of fans and pundits across the NBA would have anticipated, that at this point in the season they would be anywhere close to this level of contention, let alone maybe win 30 games all season. They're approaching that here at 22-22 through the 44 games. But Lonzo Ball is a name that to me is intriguing for them. And of course, the price in this whole situation matters a lot when you look up and down at the way the Knicks are built and how important a potential playoff berth would be, but also with the knowledge that this is not a team that by any means is a finished product, and it would not be smart for them to go out and say mortgage the future to try and get into the playoffs. That's not the way a prudent NBA organization would operate. So I'm interested to see how the Knicks play this, and then I think it comes down to price. I do believe that Lonzo Ball would be a good fit, but to tell you the truth, I wouldn't be crazy about giving up a ton for him, because I know he's still young and I know he's done some good things. I'm just not sure I'm all aboard him as a game changer for the Knicks, as in this is a top-tier team in the Eastern Conference, because you're pairing Lonzo Ball with Julius Randle.
Nick, you're absolutely correct about the philosophy behind the type of acquisitions the Knicks are going to look into. Leon Rose knows for sure that this is not the run. This is not the Cinderella year even. It's not time yet.
Oral Roberts.
We're not there. Julius is found money. Emmanuel Quickley is found money. Tom Thibodeau found money, not in terms of his skill that we knew was there, but his modern success. They're having a great time this year with the squad they've got. And we're even hearing rumblings about how their unwillingness to disrupt the team chemistry is weighing into potential decisions. I can say that in regards to Lonzo Ball, they've called. Lots of teams have called, and they've talked deals, and Griffin is not budging on the price in regards to just the range that the Knicks are looking at. The one thing about Leon Rose that's been particularly consistent, despite the small sample size in his time as Knicks Pobo, would be that he puts out a price and sticks to it. We heard he tried trading up for Obi Toppin. He had his offer, and that was it. Cleveland asked for more. He said, I'll take my chances at 8. He made an offer to Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward received a larger one from Charlotte, and he said, enjoy. It continues. Leon Rose is not going to negotiate out of a place of desperation. He spent too much time as a legitimate power broker in the NBA to be putting himself in those disadvantages. He knows not to overpay, and he knows that it's not worth it, especially because of where the Knicks are. In regards to Lonzo, again, the interest is real, but that philosophy, despite Lonzo's last name making him particularly interesting to various fans and potentially people in the organization, just the talent that we know is there as well, it's not worth overpaying this year. And they have the cap space that a lot of other teams don't in free agency. Lonzo Ball going to be entering restricted free agency. The Knicks are still in position to make a pretty decent offer. And at the end of the day, I think that if Worldwide Wes and Leon Rose are in a room with LeVar Ball and Lonzo Ball, it's going to be tough for them to leave that room without a pen touching some paper. So with the cap space, the flexibility, the assets that the Knicks have, they could make the move at the deadline. I can't foresee any notable acquisitions, not even just on the Lonzo front. But if you're talking about other big names, Andre Drummond has been one that has come up a couple times in connection, a big name, in my opinion, just in terms of the news at this point and not on-court production. The Knicks have looked into him as well. There was interest within the organization. Or teams aren't monoliths. You have guys with conflicting opinions. There was indeed real interest in the Knicks organization in Andre Drummond, but nothing enough to strike a deal, including assets, before the deadline. And I don't even think there's enough interest for a buyout offer to come his way from MSG.
I think that's smart on the part of the Knicks as well, just because of the potential resources that would have to be, acute in terms of money and otherwise. And that was not a move that I thought would have been smart for them. And again, it's in keeping with the way this organization has been run under Worldwide West, and it's a credit to them. They are making the smart moves. That's a Phil Jackson move. Okay, there's a guy who we think is pretty good. We're going to try and pounce on him, or out of desperation, we're going to throw a bunch of money around. And the Knicks, at least as it stands right now, seem to be finally headed in that right direction. And that's just another case of it. And I really like their approach. I think that's a really great approach to have, especially with the situation that they are in right now. Perhaps if you're in a spot like the Lakers or the Clippers or the Nets, where it's okay, one move could push us across to being a championship contending team or over the hump to be an NBA champion. Okay, then overpay, then make that type of move that's going to allow you to do that. But at this point, the Knicks are not close to doing that. They're 22-22, tied for a sixth, as great a season as that is based upon the way things have gone for them over the last decade. But it's not smart as well when you lose sight of where you are as an organization. They have not done that. They are building this thing the right way. And I think that's more than anything else what has to be so encouraging for Knicks fans, because there's been so much of that over the last few years of dealing with the desperation, that's not the move we should make, but we feel like we've got to do something to satisfy a fan base that hasn't had results. And it's confidence building for this fan base and this organization, because you feel like they're headed in the right direction. Looking at Aaron Gordon and Kyle Lowry, two of the top names that are out there in terms of trade. Gordon, of course, requesting the trade from the Orlando Magic, and apparently the Boston Celtics at the top of a list that would potentially be involved in trading for him. I like that move for them. Again, there's the price that we clearly are not privy to because the trade hasn't happened yet. But I think he would be an excellent fit for a team that Danny Ainge said earlier this season, by his own admission, we're just not good enough as a roster. And I think Aaron Gordon would add a lot. They seem to be a little redundant at that position with Tristan Thompson, a crowded front court as well. So I'd be curious to see how they would really negotiate all of those things. But I do think that Aaron Gordon would be a plus on that team with Kemba Walker at the helm and some of the other pieces that they have with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
I would add Minnesota to that list of teams looking at Gordon. It seems to me that Rosas in Minnesota is looking for a power forward that's athletic to put next to Cat, whether that's to help him recover on the defensive end or whatever the thinking is. We've heard John Collins, and we've now heard Gordon, some interest from Minnesota, at least mild, it's existent. Gordon is an interesting case of a player. There's always that potential, right? There's there's something more, and it doesn't come out on the court. And then every offseason, it's like, okay, and now they got this guy. Now they have this assistant coach. Now he's starting next to this guy, and this is the year. And then the next offseason, it's like, all right, well, he had a tough year, but, now we got this. Aaron Gordon, I don't think is worth giving up on. But if you're Orlando and in the situation that they are in, I don't think it's a bad idea to look and see what you can get for him. I would assume Boston's package is centered around one of, whether it be Nesmith or Pritchard, a young player like that, and some draft compensation. Ainge hasn't made a mid-season trade in a very, very, very long time. But the Celtics, as you were saying, know where they're at.
But don't you think it's time, just as a fair point or a counter argument to that, it's not necessarily in what they have traditionally done, but
right.
This is a team that isn't achieving the way they had hoped either.
No, and they know it.
This would be the push.
They know that between Brown and Tatum, just if you look across the league, you have duos killing it, regardless of conference or division. Paul and Booker, Kawhi and George, Davis and James. You have your plethora of duos across the league. Tatum and Brown are both all-stars this year. These are two very talented young wings. And to be frank, Tatum and Brown both are the type of wing that all 30 NBA teams lust over when draft time comes around. It's the wing that can have some playmaking chops, that can score, that can defend, is athletic. There's a lot there going for both of them. And between what's going on with Walker, between some disappointing play from Smart, between a lack of spacing in the starting lineup due to some desire to start two centers all the time, Boston's got to shake some stuff up. And I think they are as aware of it as we are.
Finally, Kyle Lowry. There was some rumors about, I know Woj tweeted out today that they might be interested, the Lakers might be interested in Kyle Lowry. I don't see at all what the Lakers have to give up for him and what his market may look like. The reporting sounds like it's the Raptors not budging a ton on a pretty hefty asking price. And it sounds like he's going to be dealt, but I think he can be a game changer for a team, a guy who has that championship pedigree, who's been in the playoffs and in the situation a lot before. And in particular, this time, whatever situation he would be going to would likely not be the number one or even number two option, which he had perhaps struggled with at times in Toronto. That would not be the situation. I think he would be a great addition to, again, the Lakers, if they could pull it off. Some of the other teams that are being rumored. I know Boston, again, was in that conversation as well. I think he would be a great fit there. But I'm curious to see what comes of Kyle Lowry in that whole situation, because Aaron Gordon is an interesting candidate. Lonzo, does he really get moved? It sounds like Lowry's really going somewhere, and I think that might be a piece and a move that may go a little bit toward determining who's going to be in a great position come playoff time.
Absolutely. We were talking about this market at the trade deadline. Who besides Kyle Lowry has been brought up that can bring that type of impact to a playoff team? I know Kyle Lowry due to the couple stretches, the playoff stretches with DeMar DeRozan, was labeled as someone who couldn't necessarily perform in the playoffs, but that label disappeared quite quickly when he was paired with Mr. Leonard and they made their run. To me, Kyle Lowry is the type of player that would be perfect in Philadelphia. I think Simmons and Embiid are both having good years, Embiid specifically, but a guy like Lowry come playoff time would give them that same kind of advantage against defenses that having someone like Jimmy Butler did when they had him. And I think that core could have done something special. They were derailed by the multiple bounces of Kawhi Leonard's fading mid-range game winner, but I think Kyle Lowry would be a great acquisition for Philadelphia or even a team like Miami. I know Miami has been looking into it, and I think their prerogative is to try to figure out a deal that doesn't involve Dragic and that doesn't involve Hero. Those are two guys they love down there in Miami, and I know Dragic and Hero love being in Miami, so that they're not trying to part ways with either of them. But that's another team that's been in contact with Toronto about their potentially greatest player in franchise history, legacy-wise.
Before we get out of here to break, I don't think the Lakers have enough to get Lowry. You're in agreement with me on that?
They have Horton Tucker and Kuzma and draft picks that I cannot tell you what years are attached to them because of the emptying of the cupboard that happened with the Davis trade. I think realistically, they're not a real destination.
All right, good. So we're on the same page there. Just over 20 minutes from now, we talk March Madness after the break. The latest from Major League Baseball spring training, Francisco Lindor's contract, and good start to the spring. Latest on the Yankees injury situation. And according to Aaron Judge, who is the biggest threat to the Yankees here in 2021 in the American League East. Stay tuned. This is One on One. Here on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. Nick DeLuca, Chris Persianen. Alex Wolves, our producer here on a Wednesday night. Let's get into some Major League Baseball spring training, and in particular, the two New York teams that we love to spend so much time talking about. Regular season right around the corner, starting in a little over a week. The Yankees will be opening up on April the 1st, so it's a week from today, getting things kicked off at the stadium against the Toronto Blue Jays. Let's start with the Mets, however, because their biggest offseason acquisition, Francisco Lindor, is out to an outstanding start in spring training. He has a over 1,000 OPS and has homered 4 times in his last 6 games. A guy who the Mets are trying to make sure that they're doing everything that they can to extend, and a good sign so far for a guy that the Mets are really counting on going forward here into 2021 as they look to get back to the postseason for the first time in a couple of years.
Absolutely. As a Mets fan, it was great news to see the Lindor acquisition. But as you said, it has to be a priority to extend him. You know, it's going to be a big number, both on the years and the dollars, but an extension, locking him in long term, not only on the field, what that does for the team, but off the field, that having that confidence in your guy, getting that deal done, not having to deal with the business side of things and just getting to play ball.
I thought it was a great acquisition for them as somebody who's going to add a lot to their lineup in addition to the defense, which is a little underrated, particularly for the Mets, who struggled in that department a little bit a season ago. Ahmed Rosario, who was shipped the other way in that deal, was not somebody who was an ultra outstanding defender, despite having a lot of the tools to be one. And again, he's a young player too, so you'd have to see if he can figure it out at some point throughout his career. But I just think that Francisco Lindor, there's a reason why he's a guy who's going to get over a $300 million contract, and it'll probably be pushing 350. The valuable commodity that is a switch-hitting shortstop who plays great defense, and the personality that he brings to your clubhouse is something that is not easily replicated throughout the entirety of Major League Baseball. It's just he is a special talent. The Mets are lucky and excited to have him. And you have to expect big things in the middle of that Mets lineup that I think a lot of people felt was really good. To me, the question, of course, as you look up and down their roster, is going to head towards the bullpen and the pitching rotation with some of the injuries and the ways that things will shake out for them then. But they have to be thrilled with this trade for Francisco Lindor at this point. And you'd have to imagine that this spring has just served as confirmation bias because he's been off to an outstanding start.
I think you can easily argue that Lindor is a top position player in baseball, top 5, 6, 4, whatever exact number is.
Top 5.
Top 5 I like because he is special. He was mic'd up the other day. Had a nice little 1-minute clip come out of Lindor out on the field. He is hilarious, and he, as we know, is quite the special talent on the field. So the exact type of guy as a fan you want to root for, you love to root for, and just a great acquisition on and off the field for the Mets. Again, locking him up has to be important, but he's the type of guy who can help make questions around other parts of the roster a little less pressing with the talent that he brings to his own position.
Here's my major question. How much are we supposed to read into a good start to spring training? Is that something you're optimistic for at all, or are we wiping the slate clean as opening day starts in a week?
I think the fun route is to always just pick and choose whatever goes along with your own agenda. But realistically, I can't just say Lindor is going to come out and hit as many homers. It's the talent is there. I'm not going to place incredibly high expectations on him as a result of the hot start here in spring training, but it's just a nice vote of confidence towards, seeing that extension number come out and just not even doubting it, knowing you've got a real guy, your guy.
I think it's along the lines of the whole COVID season a year ago. If you had a good season, yeah, of course it's sustainable. If not, well, there was a lot going against you. It's only 60 games. It would have self-corrected over 162. So you just roll with whatever comes your way. I don't know that I'd be in the business of extending Francisco Lindor because of a good start to the spring. I think that's more on the track record, and I don't know how I would feel just based upon anything in spring training. But it's the way things work, and of course, always a comfort if you're able to go out and get to a good start. But it doesn't really matter until things begin when April turns on the calendar and the games count for real. I want to switch over to the Yankees and a team that does have a little bit more going on other than just a good start to the top offseason acquisition. They are dealing with a couple of injuries. Aaron Judge with some interesting comments and talking to a friend of our station, Bruce Beck, and some of the things that he said in surveying the landscape of the American League East. I want to start, however, with something that was very interesting to me about Aaron Boone's plan, at least for opening day, being that Gary Sanchez will open the season as the team's starting catcher for Garrett Cole. Of course, it's no secret that Cole worked for the majority of the end of last season exclusively with Kyle Higashioka. That was something that the Yankees took off with and ran with because of how effective that Cole was able to be throughout the remainder of that season as he really got in a groove with somebody who he was really familiar with and had a history with previously. But I find it fascinating that they're going to go back to Gary Sanchez in this situation. They're putting a lot of stock in him again. I'm inclined to think it's time for a bounce back season, but at the same time, it's hard to argue with the results that Kyle Higashioka and Cole were able to produce on the defensive side. So in translation, Gary Sanchez better hit, or his time as the starting catcher for the Yankees is limited.
I think having the type of talent that the Yankees do at pitcher makes that pressure important and really apparent. Sanchez wasn't particularly the greatest last year. He didn't have the best season, but
that's an understatement. He hit 147. He was very bad.
I know as a Mets fan, I try not to be too mean to the crosstown rivals because I'm not particularly historically standing in the best position to talk trash. But if you're going to talk about spring training, talk about basing things off spring training, his approach at the plate has been pretty encouraging so far. He's been going opposite field a little more, and I think despite the rough season last year, this is, if the plan is there and if they're working on it and they have this set on their minds that this is the direction they're going in, I don't think it's incredibly unfair to think that a resolution that's not exactly the worst will come out of it. We know there's some talent there. It's not a lost cause. It's I think there's a path to success. I won't rule it out.
I think there is a path to success, and I expect Sanchez to get on the right track this year. I think that he has the potential, and he's just too good a player to be playing the way he did last year. And I know that there were the struggles, and they have continued at times even into this spring. And there was an interesting article that I read in Aaron Boone answering some questions about him because he is probably the most scrutinized and, quite frankly, most interesting topic for people to explore for the Yankees spring training, maybe outside of the starting rotation, because this is a team that everybody expects to be good, has been very good for the last number of years now. But the question that they need answered is, are they going to be able to get over the hump and finally at least get to a World Series, a place that they haven't been since 2009 and yet knocking on the door since 2017 with this new core. So I know that that's a position that people are really interested in because of Sanchez's talent, the way that he played in 2016. You go back and you watch the highlights, it's incredible. I mean, the way that he came up and burst on the scene, and then in 17, he hits 270. It's over 30 home runs and drives in 100 people. It's unbelievable to see the way that things have become a struggle for him. And even he's a year removed from 2019, where he really struggled in the second half, but still puts up 232 and 34 homers and close to 80 RBIs. So this is a guy that is ultra talented. There's no denying that. We say this all the time when we talk about Gary Sanchez, but at some point, the results need to come through and match the talent. And
Right.
unfortunately, they're not right now. And I don't know what the disconnect is. There was some talk at times with him about the potential focus of things, but I would have to believe that this is a time where he's going to be focused because he's a bad year away from the Yankees looking for another solution at their starting catcher position. So I know that they've got the confidence in Gary Sanchez. He's not a talent that you give up on with the way that he can just put a ball on the bat. And just for reference here, we know that Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton can hit rockets. Gary Sanchez hits the ball that hard too. When he actually gets a hold of a baseball, Gary Sanchez can hit a ball 120 miles an hour off the bat. That's the potential the Yankees have fallen in love with. But at some point, you got to actualize that potential, and he just hasn't been able to do that. That said, I expect a big year. I expect a bounce back for him. He's just too talented. Maybe he's not 270, 30-plus home runs. I don't think he's 147 either. So I'm expecting a better year from him. I actually do think that fans in the stands, to me, another fascinating conversation to be had about the changes here in 2021 for Major League Baseball. I think that'll help him a little bit to keep him engaged. I'm expecting a better season for Gary Sanchez.
I think regardless of the sport, it's never unfair to side with betting on talent. So when you're looking at baseball, stats are such a huge just statistical analysis, one of my favorite aspects of baseball, and the different aspects. You talk all the time about regression to the mean, or in this case, maybe not regression, but an adjustment to the mean. You see Sanchez's season last year, and it just didn't match up with the talent we know he has, as you were saying. The combination of this new approach we're seeing at the plate and the seeming trust in him from the staff to have him start the season is, I think, what it'll take for that bounce back season to ensue. He's at the point now where I think it's up to him, though, as you're saying, to actualize that potential. If he can do it, I think we all know how bright his future can be.
I'm with you. And you're hoping that he can figure things out, because this is probably the last strike for Gary Sanchez. I would not expect the Yankees, if he were to have another difficult season the way he did last year, that they would not think about moving on and moving elsewhere and just saying, all right, it's time to find another solution rather to this situation. Want to move on to some of Aaron Judge's comments. He was talking to Bruce Beck and made an interesting statement in saying that the biggest competition for the Yankees this upcoming season within their division is the Tampa Bay Rays. Of course, the Rays making a couple of moves this offseason, shipping away Blake Snell to the San Diego Padres as a big one. They're cutting salary a bit in a move that has been seen for a number of teams across Major League Baseball because of the COVID situation and really lack of revenue sharing that has adjusted things a little bit. There, to me, seems to be a consensus that it's the Toronto Blue Jays that would be the team next in line to beat if you're not talking about the New York Yankees. That's where I'm sitting here. I don't believe that the Rays are the top threat to the Yankees. It's the Blue Jays. I don't know how you feel about the whole situation, but to me, that was interesting to hear him say.
Yeah, for sure. I think in terms of the landscape of the AL East, it comes down, in my opinion, to your thoughts on the Blue Jays pitching. If you think that they have a solid enough rotation, that offense is going to be strong enough across the board to probably have them in that number 2 spot. I think the Rays aren't – I can't call them a bad bet for the number 2 spot. We've seen they've been good at developing pitchers, and it's just it wouldn't be totally out of the question to have them be the second most successful team. But I do think it's the Yankees division to lose if we're talking about the first place standing. Too much talent.
The one thing about the Rays is that they seem to find a way to piece it together every year. And I don't know what it is about their organization, but they are outstanding in evaluating and finding talent in a way that allows them to maximize every resource that is available to them, and many times fewer than what is at the disposal of the rest of Major League Baseball. And yet they find a way to do it. And it is the Blake Snell or the trade for Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows and what was just a complete robbery. They re-signed Chris Archer this offseason as well, the guy they gave up to get him a couple of years ago. But that trade was just mind-boggling from the start. So it's amazing what the Rays have been able to do as an organization and how well they have been run over the last few years to allow them to remain competitive. And it's something that was fascinating to watch throughout the course of 2020. And my guess in reading into Judge's comments is just out of respect for who is the reigning division champion. I don't think he was going to be, as a player within the division, in the business of going through on a roster by roster basis as presently constructed here in 2021, who's really the best team. But I think you nailed it in terms of what is the division going to come down to. I agree that it's the Yankees to lose. And the only way that you would not pick the Yankees is if you are ultra confident in that Blue Jays pitching staff. I just don't believe that there's reason to be. Hyun-Jin Ryu at the top of things is someone who has been good in the league for a while, although he did struggle at times against the Yankees last year, and is not someone who I think has proven to be a consistently top arm in the major leagues. Not that he has been bad. He did start an all-star game, but really wasn't able to sustain that throughout the course of a full season this back in 2019. So I don't know. And even if you do like him past that, they've got Nate Peterson, who's a young arm who could potentially come in. And I know that organization is very high on. It's a lineup that looks really good because it is. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette and Kevin Biggio and Danny Jansen. They bring in George Springer as well. That's a lineup that you don't want to mess with. That's a legitimate lineup that they're running out there. I just don't see enough from their pitching staff from a starter's perspective, from a reliever's perspective either, that they would be able to take down a team like the Yankees, who have their own questions at starting pitcher. But at the same time, you've got Garrett Cole and eventually Luis Severino. Jameson Tyone is someone who has looked very good in the spring. And you just feel like the Yankees are in a better position and are more equipped to figure this thing out than the Blue Jays, who don't seem to have a lot there.
Well, in terms of the divisional respect, I have to reference the time that Tristan Thompson, after LeBron James left, said that the Cavs, because they won the division the last year, were still going to be a force to be reckoned with. That we've seen some questionable logic get employed by players before as to not give an awkward answer to the media. So I think you might be on to something there. Again, with the Blue Jays pitching, it's we know the talent's there across the board. Otherwise, it's how far can they really go? I think they'll be winning, despite their pitching, as opposed to because of it, for sure. If you think that it can be just enough, not great, not record setting, if it can be enough, they can be good enough and be in the number 2 spot behind the Yanks. But I think the fact that question is there would indeed make it unreasonable to project them ahead of the Yankees. Again, Springer was someone I wanted on the Mets, so a player I do indeed respect and know brings a lot to the table. Again, not to be messed with. They've got the talent, but the pitching's gotta be there.
It does. I don't think it's there as of yet. I do believe that they could potentially be a playoff team depending on how well some of that pitching is able to perform. They remind me a lot of a younger version of what we've seen from the Minnesota Twins the last couple of years. A team that is really well built, is going to hit a lot of home runs and produce a lot of plate, and yet at the same time don't really have that pitching that you need every time the postseason comes around. And it is very often the difference something that the Yankees really had not had over the last couple of years, and finally got it with Garrett Cole. And then the bats went quiet in Game 5 of the American League Division Series, hoping for a better fate as a team that I would have to believe is a cut above the rest in the American League right now. We'll see when the games start being played, because that's why they play the games. On paper, it looks good, but at some point, you're going to have to earn it on the diamond. Final segment of the night. When we come back, we'll talk some March Madness, recap last weekend's games, a second chance segment for Chris and I to pick who we think is going to go forward. We'll get a do-over in terms of the Sweet 16 going forward. Back with the final segment of One on One right after this. Over 10 minutes left here on One Nightly, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Nick DeLuca, Chris Persianen, as we'll get into wrapping up last weekend of the NCAA tournament and previewing who we think will advance going forward in what was a wild opening weekend. We had a 15 seed in Oral Roberts win 2 games, of course, shocking Ohio State in round 1, and then a win over Florida to advance to the Sweet 16. The biggest surprise with some shakeups, Syracuse, as they seem to always do, find a way into the Sweet 16, as well as an 11 seed USC downing Kansas by 34, which was pretty amazing. Arkansas, a narrow win over Texas Tech, and Villanova able to advance against number 1 seeded Baylor. Oregon State, a 12 seed, also in the Sweet 16 as the team that was picked second to last in the preseason Pac-12 poll. So there's a lot of movement and teams that are so fascinating to watch and storylines to monitor. Curious, just in a quick recap of last weekend, it's got to be Oral Roberts that's the biggest shocker, right?
Absolutely. Oral Roberts, not only a fan favorite, but a favorite of the bettors as well. Of course, I speak about betting hypothetically for legal reasons, but people love the Cinderella story, the underdog, the team that comes out of nowhere that has just no expectations. See how far they can go, and Oral Roberts pulling out 2 wins. Just what a sight! It was fun. It was fun to watch. I have to admit, the upsets are fun.
I came into this tournament with the belief that just because of the conditions this season and the way that everything had been thrown together, as much as these teams are in as much of a rhythm as you can be based upon the circumstances, that you might actually see fewer upsets this year. That it would just be easier to win on talent alone, and that was going to be the way that things would go down. And I could not have been more wrong going into the NCAA tournament, as so many are. I mean, for crying out loud, you tell your dog which team to pick, and that dog might have more success than you, or whether it be the baby with the team logo on the block. There are a number of them to figure it out, which pencil will stick the longest. I mean, you've seen the commercials, but it's just unbelievable how this tournament, it's what makes it so much fun to talk about and to cover, just the way that things can be turned on their head, and just the upsets. It's what makes it March Madness. It makes it so much fun to watch and to pay attention to. But was really impressed by Oral Roberts. I was really impressed by Alabama as a team that I feel like is a number 2 seed, is going under the radar a little bit. Nate Oates doing an excellent job there. They shot the lights out to advance to the Sweet 16. They were, in my opinion, outstanding. They take down Maryland, who was a 10 seed, who I knew a lot of people, including Jackson Heil, were very high on in looking at the way the landscape unfolded. But to put up 96 points on that type of team, I was really impressed with the way they were able to get things going offensively. But as we go forward and giving our do-over bracket here and just at least getting into the matchups this weekend, we'll go matchup by matchup and just go through them and see who we've got advancing. You're not wrong as of yet going forward, so that's a good thing. You might not have had Creighton in the Sweet 16. You might not have had USC or Oregon or Arkansas. I know you didn't have Oral Roberts, but that doesn't matter who's advancing from this point on. We'll start with Gonzaga and Creighton here in the Sweet 16.
Nick, I have to start off by talking about bacon. They put bacon in tiny helmets, and they have the dog choose. It's fabulous. I love the videos. They're great, and I think they would indeed have had a better success rate than a lot of bracketologists, as I like to call them, in predicting some of these winners. In terms of Gonzaga, as someone who's always watching March Madness, I can't stop myself. I'm always watching from an NBA scouting perspective as well. I've been watching Gonzaga all year long. They have 2 top guys in Corey Kispert and Jalen Suggs, and the team in general, the beautiful, beautiful brand of basketball that's played, not just as a result of having Suggs as their engine, but just the coaching, the offense, the willingness to pass. They play a great brand of basketball at Gonzaga. I would have to pick them to advance.
I agree with you. It's got to be Gonzaga. Creighton has had a very good season, and a team that narrowly got by UC Santa Barbara. Were in more control against Ohio, but not a team that has overall impressed me a ton. Not to the point where they're taking down a Gonzaga team that has been so good throughout this entire season. I'm going to take Gonzaga. Pac-12 meeting, a conference that has been so good throughout this tournament. USC and Andy Enfield meeting Dana Altman in Oregon in a matchup that 2 teams that perhaps you probably wouldn't have picked to get here, especially USC over Kansas, and for that matter, Oregon taking down Iowa. But 2 teams that have really found their stride in the tournament. Which way are you leaning here?
It's tough, but these 2 teams met up, and it took Oregon hitting a lot of their perimeter shots to get them a win. And not to mention, again, from a scouting perspective, Evan Mobley had a terrible game when Oregon was able to beat them. I think that both teams showed some pretty decent offensive prowess in the last round, but the defense from Oregon is where I'm concerned. I think if Mobley is able to string together, and with his talent, I'm going to bet on it, a good enough game, I'm going to pick USC here to take the win. It's a defensive concern for me with Oregon.
This is a tough one because two coaches in particular that have great track records in the tournament, and you know that each team is independent, and to try and get a read on what's going to happen the next time around, you try and go to what you have the most reference with, and that's the coaches. And this is a tough one for me. I'm going to go Oregon, though. I just like the way that they've been able to play. The win over Iowa was extremely impressive. I feel like they're rolling. Kansas in a stop and start situation. USC was able to catch them in a tough situation. I think Oregon, who is going to be better rested in this situation as well, of course, advancing past the first round because of COVID issues against VCU, are going to be in a good spot there. And I like them to advance to the Elite Eight. Down the bracket, Michigan and Florida State. This a 1-4 matchup. We were actually supposed to get this, so you might have predicted this one. Michigan, Florida State, who you're taking?
We're talking about coaching and being able to predict how teams play. I want to talk about a program that really seems to value defense, would be FSU. And Michigan losing livers for the tournament, committing a good amount of turnovers in their last game. It's not I'm not going along with the seeding, but FSU is going to be my pick here. I'm going to go with the upset.
I love what Leonard Hamilton has done. Really impressive in a down ACC this year, and they've had a good track record. But I really, really like what Juwan Howard is getting done in Michigan.
I can't blame you.
I don't see them falling here. I recognize the concerns. I get it. I'm going to go with Michigan to continue on here after a win over Florida State. Final on the left side of your bracket, if you're following along at home, 11th seeded UCLA, second seeded Alabama. I don't know that it's too much of a secret who I'm going to take. Full disclosure, I'm going to go with Alabama. They really impressed me over Maryland. This is a team that I see continuing on, particularly when matched up with an 11 seed in UCLA.
I'm with you. I have Alabama, and the betting trend to know here in terms of what's going on the financial side. Not serious financial, but you know how it goes. Alabama, they happen to be 23-10 in their last 33 games against the spread, following an against the spread win. That's a trend I'm expecting to continue. Again, as you said, I love their play. You know, for me with college basketball, I'm not as intense of just a fan as I see myself as being with the NBA and college basketball. I just try to just have real fun with it. The atmosphere, the students, the fans. It's a fun league to watch. I love Alabama. I love what they bring. I love their style of play. I'm going to go with you here. Back your pick. Take it.
We're going to have to go rapid fire through the right side of the bracket. So quickly, Houston and Syracuse. Syracuse, could they continue their magical run to the Elite Eight?
Buddy Boeheim is not going to do it for me. I'm going to take Houston.
I'm gonna roll with it. I think Jim Boeheim has figured out something. I don't think the magic stops here. I like them going to the Elite Eight.
I don't hate it.
They find a way. I'm telling you, that zone in particular, teams have not seen it, and it seems to give them problems in the tournament. I like Syracuse to advance. Loyola Chicago, huge upset win last weekend against Illinois. They might be the best 8 seed in tournament history, taking on the 12 seed Oregon State Beavers. Loyola Chicago is a program that you love, and you feel like they are extremely well coached and a really well run program. I'm not going to bet against Sister Jean in this situation, and it has little to do with Sister Jean and more about what they've been able to do. I really like Loyola Chicago.
My one-liner take was going to be, who am I to bet against Sister Jean? Got to go with Loyola. Ride the momentum. That upset was great. And Oregon State beat Oklahoma State, which, as someone who watched a lot of Cade Cunningham, I know was not the most impressive of teams this year in general. Talent was there on Cunningham's part for sure. The rest of the roster was something. Gonna go with your pick here as well.
Would not have pegged a 3-15 matchup to appear in the Sweet 16, yet that's what we have. Oral Roberts, could they continue the madness into the Elite Eight? They match up this time with Arkansas.
I feel terrible saying it, but I have to. I'll explain the connection. Eric Musselman is the son of Tom Thibodeau's first mentor. Tom Thibodeau teams do not play with their food. Moses Moody is one of my favorite prospects in the entire draft class this year. I think he is much more than the prototypical 3-and-D wing, Bridges, Vassell type guy. I think the offensive upside is there in the Chris Middleton department. Just to talk about a guy whose caliber I think he could be in. Give me Arkansas here. I'm sorry. Give me Arkansas.
At some point, there's still a 15 seed. I agree with you. The Magic's going to run out. Time has run out on Oral Roberts. 2 wins for a 15 is outstanding. That is a win in their book to advance to the second weekend. I just think at some point you're going to see an Arkansas team that'll be in a position to take over a game and is just more talented. And it's hard to win 3 games in a row when you are likely the lesser team in all 3 of those games. Wrap up the Sweet 16, Baylor and Villanova. Baylor, of course, a great regular season, a number 1 seed. Villanova, the Fortune 500 company, and Jay Wright, who have just been so successful throughout the last couple of years.
I love Robinson Earl. I'm gonna guess a high scoring win here for the Bears. I think Baylor pulls this one out.
I hate to agree with you, but I'm going to their Villanova, a good regular season, but I don't think they're special. Baylor is, and things will continue on for them because they're just more talented. And I think that's going to win out, at least in this matchup, because 2 teams that are well coached. It's tough to outgun a Baylor in this situation with the way that they play. So that'll do it for us here on One-on-One. If you missed any of today's segments, all the contents from today's show will be available on demand on the WFUV Sports YouTube channel. The sports director of WFUV, Bobby Chaffardini, the producer of today's show, has been Alex Wolves. For Chris Persianen, I'm Nick DeLuca. Thanks for hanging out with us. One-on-One, a production of WFUV Sports.